likely not set up to succeed. How is it that Microsoft and OpenAI's CEOs are telling us to panic because white-collar jobs are going to be replaced by AI? And then there's endless evidence of the opposite. Most companies that implement AI see little gains, with execs from over 80% of companies reporting no productivity gains at all. In this episode of the Product Impact Podcast, we tackle why your AI metrics are lying to you. We'll provide you with a framework for improving AI product performance. If value is only defined as monetization, so conversion, retention, expansion, then we will ship products that are profitable but quietly harmful. In this episode, you'll learn why agents hide friction from view, creating dangerous impact blindness. To balance power, speed, impact, and joy to win in the AI era, like F1 cars. But success does not equal satisfaction. You have to measure both outcomes. And to measure outcomes and feelings, not just activity logs and check marks. We are living in one of the most amazing eras to work in. So the power of technology is undeniable, right? You can prototype whole experiences in hours, generate code, simulate flows, draft policies, and stitch together multi-step workflows that used to require a team and a half. But here's what's bothering me. Our ability to evaluate whether any of this produces better outcomes is still primitive. Not evil, not incompetent, just behind. And I want to be honest about how teams have always operated. We've always flown with proxies. So if customers churn or NPS drops, something went wrong. If they renew, expand, grow their account, they're getting value. But those are still guesses, but they're the best available guesses.
And when we think about the old world, those proxies worked well enough because products were more deterministic and the struggle of users was much more visible. When a user got stuck inside your flow, it was obvious. They would complain about it. When you saw them abandon a checkout, they would rage click out of it. They would open support tickets. You'd see their dissatisfaction everywhere. And you could infer what was going to happen in regards to churn and how effective your product was and specifically where those issues were happening.
But we're crossing into a new world, right? Agents, autonomy, background action. And my fear is we're about to enter an entirely new era of impact blindness. Because once every business rolls out agents, the systems will run with less human interaction. And this means that there's less observable friction. The telemetry collapses to success logs, failure logs, escalation logs, but almost nothing about satisfaction, confidence, regret, trust, or the user's actual outcomes.
And to make it worse, agents are about to come on the scene, and they are explicitly being built to operate the web directly without the impact of users in many, many forms. They're going to be doing our work for us. They're going to be ordering our groceries, navigating our sites, filling out forms, just like a human would, but in the background and without supervision.
Exactly, right? That's the delusion we're here to pressure test. You have dashboards filled with green check marks while trust leaks quietly. So today we're going to do something very explicit. We're not pretending that we can measure everything perfectly. We're not pretending we can eliminate proxies, but let's upgrade the proxy chain so we don't go blind in the agent era. And we want to anchor that around a bullseye model from our work. This is around power, speed, impact, and joy. This episode was brought to you by e01. Founded in 2012, e01 is the expert consultancy that empowers your team to ship products that are proven to deliver impact in the AI era. e01 specializes in measuring the impact of AI products, improving performance of LLM-powered products, and working with leadership to define an AI vision and product strategy. e01's clients have included Spotify, Microsoft, Mozilla, National Football League, Hims and Hers, various government agencies, and various universities, amongst others. e01 is the expert you need to prove that your next release will deliver the impact you need. Visit e01.ca.
This is 2026 now, and almost every product will claim they're AI powered. That's the standard now. Power is actually behind every one of these products, and most of them are using the same infrastructure. But what this means is that the edge moves away from capability and towards performance. What outcomes you actually create and how reliably you create them matters more than ever. There's a bullseye here, and it isn't maximize everything because that's insane. The correct trade-off is to figure out how to manage four pillars that define the quality of an experience. Number one is the power, what it can do, what it's capable of. Two is the speed. How quickly is value being produced? How fast are those interactions? Three is impact. What outcomes actually change for users and what is it doing for the business? And the last one, which usually gets forgotten, is the joy. Do people feel confident? Do they feel in control? Do they want to come back? Is it something that they actually enjoyed using or something that drove irritation and frustration for them? Most teams really try to optimize for one, maybe two of these, and they might pretend they hit the bullseye because there's this magical product market fit that's out there. But in truth, there's a calibration of managing these four pillars that defines how good a product actually is.
Okay, and I'm going to be the measurement cop here because each pillar needs observable signals. Not perfect truth, but at least signals, right? Power is more like it can complete the workflow that you care about across real constraints. When we think of speed, we're not talking about it responds fast. Yes, that's important, but it's also time to completion, time to confidence, and time to learning for the team. When we talk about impact, it isn't people used it, therefore it was impactful. It is, did the outcomes move and did they stay moved? And when we talk about joy, we have to think beyond just pretty UI, right? Joy is confidence, it's clarity, it's control and willingness to delegate again to this product. So if we can't measure these pillars, we can't tune the setup. So we'll just end up arguing about anecdotes or worse, exec vibes.
And this is something I've been stewing over for a long time, and I've written an article about this if you want to go in deep on it. But I was on the plane watching the F1 movie. It's got a lot of critical acclaim, and I was thinking about just how complex these machines are and the calibration that goes into making one of these cars win a race. There's so many components. And I feel like this analogy is really critical when we think about products now that we're in this extremely high power era. So in an F1 car, the horsepower does matter, but it's table stakes. The car with the biggest engine does not win because weight actually undermines its success, plus adds danger and risks in many ways. What wins races is the calibration for that track, for that condition, for the driver, for the amount of turns that exists. There's so many factors at play. It comes down to the setup, the tires, the air balance, the braking, the strategy, how tuned it is, of course. But AI products are the same now that we have this turbo engine strapped to the back of it. You don't just get to declare this agent is good. You have to ask good for which course, under which conditions, and which users. These are questions that unfortunately we're not asking right now, and we need to be.
And let's be honest, most teams are measuring the wrong thing. They're measuring what they need internally, and they are measuring horsepower, more tasks completed, more messages, more automation, but they're not measuring the cornering, right? They're not measuring that level of control or how well suited it is to those courses. Did it feel controllable? Did it reduce cognitive load? Did it preserve trust? And in the agent era, changes the track every lap. So different user intent, different context, different stakes. The only way to avoid delusion is telemetry that tells you how the car is behaving, not just whether it crossed the finish line.
And let's be realistic. A big part of the issue that's happening right now is the drifting between use cases. So many products are taking on use cases that they traditionally had not been. And we're going from point solutions, SaaS platforms, into agentic solutions that are trying to take on customer support or research functions or sales function. So these teams are still calibrating for the old model while trying to adapt to this new horsepower that's strapped on there. So we need to constantly be focused on where are we sitting in terms of the calibration between power, speed, impact, and joy for the business that we're running now, for the customers that we have right now, for the competition that we have. Each one of those factors has a significant impact on what's going right and what's going wrong. Because again, if we just focus on power, we're getting the entire track wrong and we are going to lose.
Yeah. So it's incredibly important to not only just look at these pillars, but to identify as a team what are the most strategic, important outcomes that your users need to have, and be ensuring that you're measuring for those. Thank you for listening to the Product Impact Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us and leave a comment to inform the conversation.
What this all looks like is there's a bit of an impact blindness that's been running through product teams. We've kind of existed for 2 decades now, not really knowing what the impact of our products are. And the risk, the downside of that's been pretty minimal. But once we start deploying agents and swarms of agents, and once our entire business is dependent on the background negotiation from agent to agent and from database to agent and such, we're landing in a position where all we'll be able to measure is, did it succeed? How long were people there? Did it fail? Did something get escalated? That's basically it. That's not impact. That's basically a binary log that is lying to you in terms of what actually is happening behind the scenes. Impact blindness happens because interaction disappears. Historically, UX created visible signals like hesitation, abandonment, retry, support tickets. But with agents, those signals compress or vanish because the system acts in the background. And quite honestly, there's too much data to process. It's not like it used to be with heat maps or screen recordings. You will not be able to process it at the scale necessary. So the proxy chain at this point starts loosening. The feedback loops slow down and you're trying to catch up constantly. And teams that ship more activity while outcomes degrade quality.
The line that I want tattooed on every dashboard across every team is this: success does not mean satisfaction. And this is a conversation that we've been having for a while, especially when it comes to things like support. Because if someone stops engaging, does that mean that they were successful because they solved their problem? Or does it mean they were unsuccessful because they were frustrated and left? Right? A completion event can hide frustration, regret, distrust, or a feeling of lost control if we don't have other ways to measure whether or not something is successful. So let's look at some mini case studies here, right? One that we like to talk about a lot in AI case studies is travel booking. So let's think about it. An agent books a flight. Success. But it picked a brutal layover, ignored seat constraints, and the user doesn't notice until the confirmation email. They probably don't complain. They just think, I'm never using this again. That is a silent impact failure.
And worse yet, in this case, your system logs a win. That churn might show up later, but until that customer leaves, you may have no idea what actually happened until the problem becomes so significant that a mass of customers come together and tell you what's going on, or until you actually resolve the issue and people congratulate you on it. That's the problem with this. It's a lot of darkness.
But let's also be honest, right? In that use case, someone's not doing that frequently enough for you to even recognize that they're not coming back. So those proxy signals are becoming quieter and quieter. So let's look at another case: support or refund escalation. In this case, something happens, someone creates a ticket about it, the ticket gets closed, resolved, perfect. But, maybe the user felt blamed or had to double check everything manually or didn't trust the policy explanation. And they stopped using the product, even though the resolution rate looks great. So the new delusion that we're going to have to face is green check marks replace truth. But does it? Because can we trust that? In the agent era, telemetry becomes UX. It's not just analytics garnish. It becomes part of the product. If agents reduce our visibility of that friction, or if they reduce the friction that a user sees, the product needs to manufacture observability for outcomes and satisfaction. So here's a 3-layer telemetry stack that we should consider, because one layer on its own can lie or can tell just a partial truth. we want to look, I guess, past this impact blindness. Here's the 3 layers that we recommend. So the first layer is binary telemetry. This is what happened. Completed, failed. The error types. How many retries? Was it escalated to a human? This is super necessary, but is not sufficient. So layer 2, this is outcome telemetry. Did it actually help? This is time to completion, rework or correction rate, undo rate, ghost abandonment, completion followed by a non-return. Repeat delegation rate. Did they hand it a second task? This is where the impact becomes visible earlier than churn. And layer 3 is about satisfaction telemetry. How did it feel? How confident were they at the end of task? What was their perceived control? Could they steer, stop, undo? How did they feel about that? Would you use this again for this task? Do they say yes? Would they come back? The trust delta. Are they more or less willing to delegate next time and delegate quicker? If you can't or don't capture this, you can't tune for joy. And if you can't tune for joy, you lose repeat usage.
Let's remember, we're talking about agents here, but this applies to all AI-powered products. And I'll also be the first to recognize over the last 2-3 years, this kind of conversation probably rarely happened outside of enterprise settings. And the reason that it was so sparse, this kind of conversation, is we just needed to get the product to market. Most of them were pilots. Most of them, there was really no standard of success other than let's just see what this technology can do. Let's see how we can make it more consistent. And let's see what our customers feel about it. But we're entering a period now where entire businesses are dependent on the quality of the outputs and achieving specific outcomes. The problem is that because we've been rushing to ship, we haven't really solidified a strategy. And without that strategy, we can't state what success is. This is the risk right now. And the competitive moat that's going to exist in the next couple of years is how to convert that horsepower into really a drivability. It's about understanding that bullseye. And while we might have divided the entire UX community over the last 10 years in many respects, this is when they're going to come back in to be really a competitive factor, understanding how to balance these factors and really build a coherent measurement strategy and measurement plan that enables product teams to know that they're calibrating for the right things.
All right. So we've kind of touched on this idea of telemetry, which leads us into AI evals, which have up until now kind of excluded UXers or researchers. And so let's talk about what AI evals are, what they can do, and how we can use them.
An AI eval is basically, let's call it what it's a fancy QA tool to assess whether a team and a tool have succeeded at their task. But they exist because teams need scale. And the tool that we've used to apply this is an eval type called LLM as judge. In this situation, we're assuming that the LLM's outputs can't even be reviewed by humans because there's just too many conversations, too many types of tools. There's too many different types of use cases. So instead, we use the LLM as a judge framework. And it's become the standard thus far. It uses a strong model to score the outputs against a rubric, compare those versions, and detect deltas or regressions that might exist. But when we look at these benchmarks and something like the chatbot arena, they have a standard set. They might explore how using these LLMs as judges, the limitations and the opportunities of them. But there's issues at play here. Things like position bias, verbosity bias, and self-enhancement biases, while also showing strong agreement with human preferences in many settings. What all this means, it's a bunch of jumble, but the truth of it is that these systems, while being the judge and arbiter of how successful other systems are extremely flawed. And the flaws are quite often very dumb, illogical things that we've all experienced when using LLMs. Something as simple is, if I tell it what good is, it will assume that my preference overrides what the rubric is at some points. And these types of biases are very dangerous. Not to say it won't get better, but it's a real issue at play. Now, the LLM as judge is one of the best tools that exists. It's clearly not magic, but we need to explore and find better solutions.
Yeah, really quickly, I just want to touch on what those are. So, for anyone listening that isn't super familiar with evals and LLM as judge, position bias means that the LLMs tend to select whatever is in the first position more often than the second position. Verbosity bias is that it will assume that a longer response is a more complete response. So it will often deem that more correct. And the self-enhancement bias is that it actually will generally say that an LLM produced response is going to be more accurate than a human produced response. So just so everyone's aware, which clearly shows that LLM Judge, while it is the best standard right now, it's just a tool. It's not the thing that wins the race. It is the simulator lapse, right? So it can help you do a lot of great things like compare two variants quickly, catch obvious regressions, enforce your rubric consistency at scale. It can also catch things that are a little more ambiguous around tone or the way that a response is provided, and it helps you pressure test prompt or policy changes before shipping. But if you treat those scores as impact, then you're optimizing for the simulator, not for the actual course on race day, right? If we continue that analogy, because the judge is not the user. The judge is an LLM that has been trained on what it should be trying to test for. And it can be biased in ordering, position effects, length, things like that. So there is research that systematically studies position bias and how it compromises reliability. And there is work that is being done to try and enhance this and improve it. But I think it's just worth noting, right? LLM as judge can tell you if you made the output more rubric compliant, but it cannot by itself tell you if you improved joy or trust or willingness to delegate again.
The way I see it is that the deeper limitation is that most evals simplify the world down to something that actually isn't accurate. We can talk about isolated prompts, we can talk about specific tasks, we can talk about these rubrics, but real users don't behave like that. Real users don't always provide the context. They give partial information. They don't operate linearly. They change their minds. They reprioritize things. They get impatient. They might start dropping constraints in that weren't expected. They might even misunderstand what the system is doing. And they might judge the experience based on confidence and control, not just correctness. So the right stance is that the LM is one rung in an evaluation ladder, not the ladder. And the core reason, as anyone who's operated in UX understands, is because people are irrational. We change our minds, and there is no such thing as a dominant way to use a platform, let alone something as powerful as an LLM.
Okay. So how do we enhance this? And there's a lot of thinking that's really smart right now in this. And so let's compile this all together and look at what an eval ladder can look like that I want to share with teams to adopt. Because each of these rungs will catch a different class of delusion or a different area of joy. So the first one is unit tests or deterministic checks. So this is non-negotiable basic tasks. Are those being done successfully and well? The next is doing LLM as judge evals, your simulator labs, your training. This is fast comparisons and regression checks. They can be biased and incomplete, but they're really checking for those check marks that we were talking about earlier. Number 3 is UX evals. So first person multi-turn testing. This is where you're actually on the track, you're practicing, you're getting those reps in. Does it help real people across messy multi-turn interactions? So seeing how people are actually using it in that setting. So it's worth noting UX evals are a pretty new term, super newly released. There was a white paper that was just done by Outset along with the Microsoft AI team. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. And then the fourth one that I want to talk about in our eval ladder is field instrumentation in production. So let's think about that as your race day. Do the outcomes actually move? Retention, expansion, cost to serve, risk events, right? Whatever is the most important sort of instrumentation rung for you. You don't pick one, you triangulate, right? Each rung is a different camera angle on the same reality. So they're super important to look at these different fidelities and these different angles.
We need to recognize that the way we've been building products for the last 10 years was quite simply the way we used to build airplanes 100 years ago. Did it fly? How far did it fly? Did people die? Very simplistic things. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but when we think about the F1 analogy, we're talking about that this car has to race 100 times and its performance is totally dependent on calibrating for those specific conditions. The simulators matter, the track practice matters, the race telemetry matters, and the decisions in reaction to how the agent is performing is so critical. In this situation, you might be able to ship a car that wins one race, but not all of them. But if you manage your calibration and the evaluation framework that Brittany proposed here, then this thing might actually be able to perform in a multitude of different use cases with a wide range of different archetypes. That's what's impressive, and that's what's so special. And again, much of what we're talking about here applies to chat-based, LLM-based tools. While they can't go off the rails the same way an agent could, there are so many circumstances, so many situations where we're hearing about these tools and platforms providing ambiguous results, inconsistent returns, and aren't delivering the value necessary. And the teams aren't equipped with a way to properly evaluate, assess, and calibrate what's going on.
Okay, so let's talk now about UX evals a little more in depth. And these are in particular looking at how do we take a more scientific approach to measuring joy and measuring impact and outcomes that are meaningful to users. So UX evals, this has recently been most outspokenly introduced by Outset and Microsoft AI's team, where they are explicitly framed as a methodology for evaluating non-deterministic AI user experiences. So because traditional UX methods didn't really scale well for probabilistic multi-turn interactions, but traditional AI evals missed that user's lived experience. So we're looking at how can we bridge that gap between those. And the reason why I personally care is very simple. This method is trying to quantify those silent failures that success and failure logs are missing, especially around joy, about return usage. Would you use this again, right?
Mechanically, this is a beautiful solution to a very ambiguous problem, right? And I'm very proud of the people that made this. One of them was our past guest, Jess Holbrook, who leads research at Microsoft AI. And the problem that they had at the basis of this is how impactful was Microsoft Copilot? And this is a very important question and problem to pose because yes, we might have usage logs. Yes, we might know how many people shared it. Yes, we might be able to infer through some secondary qualitative research and such. So the tool that they developed basically is combining the best of all the worlds. You start with qualitative research to define the experience dimensions, understand what's going on, understand what matters. You run a first-person multi-turn interaction at scale. This is the sort of stuff, these two are the basis of UXR. But then we would compare those versions and including competitors, sometimes in a counterbalance order to figure out who's performing better in this competitive environment in different scenario models effectively. Have those participants rate dimensions like usefulness, trust, clarity, helpfulness. And then you analyze which dimensions drive preferences and why. The key move is that the participant who lived it evaluates it. That captures experiential truth rather than third-party guessing. And here's the key is we're capturing that data immediately when they're doing it. We're getting that really zero moment of truth of impact and value and confidence in that solution. And that's often what's missing if you wait until your error logs, you're waiting for some qual to show up in an error report or in a complaint file.
So here's the bullseye mapping that I want us all to put back in our minds, right? Or could they accomplish the real task without perfect prompting? Speed. Did it feel fast enough to stay in flow? A good time to done and time to confidence. 3, impact. Did it move them forward and would they choose it again? 4, joy. Did it feel controllable, trustworthy, empowering, non-humiliating? How did they feel about it? And now you can do something that most teams can't. Compare 2 setups and see which pillar is dragging your lap time. That's how you tune this bullseye. That's how you avoid impact blindness. Okay, so now I want to talk about how UX needs to evolve beyond just monetization only definitions of value. So I want to end this with something bigger than any one method. As a field, UX research, design, product, we have to keep evolving the methodologies and measurement frameworks because the default incentives are pulling us toward a really bleak definition of value. If value is only defined as monetization, so conversion, retention, expansion, then we will ship products that are profitable but quietly harmful. They extract time, they increase dependency, they create learned helplessness, they can degrade trust, they can make users feel out of control, but the dashboards might still look good. They will look successful. So we, as part of the research community, to keep pushing measurement forward so that we can answer things like, does this product reduce cognitive load or is it increasing it? Did it give the users agency or did it take it away? And which of those two is better? Did it create confidence or create quiet anxiety? Did it improve outcomes in a way that the user would choose again or that have lasting impact? UX evals are one attempt to modernize the toolkit for this era. It won't be the last, but the principle matters. In the agent era, evolution is not optional. It's the only way to keep value from collapsing into revenue.
In this world, agents are really going to be the wild card because they turn software into action services. And there are already agents designed to operate the browser directly, filling out forms, ordering, navigating, etc. Once that's normal, your product is no longer just used by humans, it's used by orchestrators, agents assembling workflows across vendors. That shrinks the visible interaction, increases the impact blindness for us. This is so significant, I cannot explain it. But again, this is all happening right now on your AI-powered chat-based interfaces today. They just don't have implications across your entire stack or across your entire platform.
Yeah, which is why in the agent era, background UX becomes things like receipts. What happened? What changed? Why? We want to be able to see that. Control. What was allowed? What needed approval? Can you undo, roll back, escalate? And then measurement. What was the outcome that you wanted? And what was the satisfaction telemetry that doesn't wait for churn? The point is that evaluation becomes part of the interface, both for the user, but also for your team as you're building, measuring, and improving.
So this might feel like a lot of extra work, but the reality here is we want to enable product teams to be able to adapt and calibrate their systems. We want to avoid the risk of deploying autonomous systems without some benchmarks and some impact studies of any form. And more than anything, we want to bring back and realign the entire product development cycle around the value of UX, the value of those core needs, those core jobs to be done. But more than anything is this 4-point bullseye, because I truly believe that if we start thinking about the whole system of how to deliver value, we can start triangulating who these archetypes are, how to solve for what they need, and align that back to a business as a whole. Because otherwise, we might be spinning out all kinds of businesses that are doomed to fail because they're going to have this lapse of judgment that's going to come in way too late.
And the winning future is where teams treat evaluation as a product requirement and who instrument our four bullseyes: power, speed, impact, and joy. They're tuning for each of these and they are conditioning and orchestrating like an F1 team. So the final takeaway that I want everybody to have is that, yes, we will still use proxies like churn and expansion. That's just a reality. But in the agent era, we need leading signals. We can't just rely on those ever quietening proxies. So outcome and satisfaction telemetry will be vital. or we won't see that crash until months later.